Hello, and welcome back to Voyage of a Time Wanderer. Today I want to talk about my favorite multicast audiobooks. So I've been meaning to start talking more about audiobooks as a format on my channel. A lot of the reading that I do is on audio, and you'll see me mention in wrap-ups or various places, oh, I listened to this on audiobook, but I haven't really done any videos dedicated specifically to audiobooks, and I think they do have some unique features as a format that are worth discussing, and one of those is multi-narrator audiobooks, which are one of my favorite types of audiobooks. So today I wanted to share my 5 favorite multi-narrator, multicast, whatever you want to call it, audiobooks that have more than one narrator. So the first audiobook that I want to talk about is The Anatomy Lesson by Nina Siegal, and this is one of the audiobooks that I really credit with unlocking my love for audiobooks, so to speak. I think I listened to it way back in 2017 now, and I want to say it was the first non-classic audiobook that I ever listened to, and it was the first time that I listened to a book in Libby and kind of played with the features like sleep timer and speeding up the pace of the narration. This book has 8 narrators, and it all takes place in a single day. So it's based around the painting The Anatomist Lesson by Rembrandt, and we're kind of following the events of the day that led up to this painting taking place. So we're following a variety of characters, from Rembrandt himself, the person whose body would eventually be used in the anatomy lesson, 1 or 2 of the students that would be observing the anatomy lesson, the owner of the house where the lesson was taking place, a few servants and errand boys, and one of the characters' love interests are all perspectives that are presented in this book. And multi-perspective books are definitely ones that lend themselves easily, I think, to multicast narration. So in this case, obviously, each individual that we were following had their own narrator for their sections of the book. Having this diversity of narrators really brought this book to life in a way that I don't think would have been possible just reading it or listening to it with a single narrator. And I really felt like I got to know each of the characters, and obviously we know that at the end of the day, because we've seen the painting and it's on the cover of the book, that one of these characters is going to end up dead and being used as the body to be dissected as part of this anatomy lesson. So you do really get emotionally attached to these characters, and even though you kind of know the ending from the beginning, you are hoping throughout the book that something will change and these characters could have a different fate. So if you enjoy historical fiction, particularly Dutch Golden Age historical fiction, which is one of my favorite historical time periods to read about, and you want to try a multicast audiobook, I think this would be a fantastic choice. Then my next favorite multicast audiobook that I want to talk about is The Old Drift by Namwali Serpell. This book had 3 narrators. We have a female narrator who narrates the majority of the book, and then we have 2 separate narrators who really play a smaller role. There is a narrator who narrates these interludes that are put in between each chapter that kind of are based off of the format of Greek classics with the chorus. And so this is a chorus that is kind of from the perspective of a swarm of mosquitoes. I know it sounds super weird, but it works really well in the book. And then we have a male narrator who does just the introductory portions of the book that are based off of the diary of a British colonist at the beginning of the 20th century, I believe. So this book is set in Zambia, and it's a multi-generational story that follows 3 generations of 3 different families and how their stories kind of intertwine both throughout Zambian history and then throughout each of the families' interactions between themselves. It's a really unique book. It has elements of historical fiction, magical realism, sci-fi, Greek classics, like I mentioned. It really isn't like anything I've ever read before, and the narrators did such an incredible job. The accents were spot on. It was such an immersive reading experience. They had moments throughout the book where they either were singing like classic folk songs or campaign ditties from political campaigns, and I would stop and play them for my husband, who's from Zambia, and he said even the tune, it wasn't just that they were singing the right words, but they were even singing them to the right tunes. So the narrators obviously put a lot of research into making it the most accurate and immersive listening experience for listeners for this audiobook, and I can't recommend this book highly enough. Because it is multi-generational, I do recommend, if you listen to the audiobook for this story, that you just go to Amazon or another bookseller website and use the look inside feature to look at the family tree that's in the front cover. Because that was my only gripe about listening to this book on audiobook, was that at times I was like, ooh, I wish there was a family tree to reference, and then when I looked in the physical book, there was a family tree. So I think I definitely recommend listening to it rather than reading it, because it's actually a really long book, but I listened to it so quickly, and then I picked up the physical copy to have in my collection from a library book sale, and I was shocked with how many pages it was, because the listening experience did not feel that long. So if you're looking to listen to some African literature, this is a book that I would highly recommend. The next audiobook that I want to talk about is Red at the Bone by Jaqueline Woodson. My best friend actually recommended this to me as a fantastic audiobook that was a fairly quick listen, and I listened to it earlier this summer and definitely really enjoyed it. This book has 5 narrators. We are weaving forwards and backwards in time from this girl's coming-of-age party. I can't remember if it's her 16th birthday or just a general kind of coming-of-age party that her grandparents hosted for her, but we're centering around this girl who's just reaching the end of her teenage years, and then we flip forwards in time to see kind of how her life unfolds, and then we also are moving backwards in time to examine her parents' and grandparents' lives and kind of how she came to be and how different family dynamics originated. This is another book where having the multicast is highly effective, because we have these chapters from different perspectives, and having the different voices helps to differentiate between the different perspectives in a way that makes it clear whose chapter or whose perspective we're listening to. Then the last 2 of my favorite 5 are both epistolary novels. And I think epistolary novels, so novels that are written in the format of letters, is another genre that really lends itself well to multicast audiobooks. So the first epistolary audiobook that I want to talk about is The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Annie Shaffer and Marianne Barrows. This book I feel like is kind of becoming like a modern historical fiction classic. I see it recommended everywhere, but I don't see as many people talking about it in audiobook format, which is how I read the book, or rather listened to the book. If you haven't heard of this book before, it's set just after World War II, kind of between, I think, London and Guernsey, which is a small island that belongs to the UK but is kind of closer to France in the Channel Islands. And Guernsey, because of its proximity to mainland Europe, did end up being occupied by the Nazis, even though the rest of Britain obviously was not. And so these characters set up a fictitious book club and called it the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society to hide the fact that they were eating forbidden rations and listening to the radio and whatnot. And then if they were asked what they were doing, they said, oh, I'm going to my book club meeting. So we are kind of learning about this history of the island during World War II as letters unfold between a farmer who lives on the island who is part of this book club and a woman in London who is a struggling author, and he had found the woman's name written in the front cover of a secondhand book that he purchased, and then because supplies were still very limited in the island, he'd written to her asking if she had any other books similar to this or by the same author, and then they had started this correspondence, and she ended up finding the history of this group very interesting and decided it would make a perfect book. So I ended up communicating through letters with all of the members of the book club, and the story goes on from there. So each of these characters has their own narrator for the letters that they write, and so it really comes across in their voice with their own accents and mannerisms, and it ended up, I could visualize the story so well that when I went to watch the movie, I felt like I didn't need to even watch the movie because the audiobook had brought the book to life in my mind so descriptively and so effectively that I already felt like I had watched the movie just listening to the book. And then the final multicast audiobook that I want to talk about today is actually nonfiction, and it's another, I feel like, Booktube classic that I see people mentioning as a favorite book all of the time, and that is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene, Hanff. This is a fairly short work of nonfiction, and again, it's one that I don't see people talking about in audio format as much as they do talk about it physically. This book actually has 7 narrators, so again, each individual, obviously they're not characters because this is nonfiction, so each individual, when their letters are being read, has their own narrator and their own voice. This is a story of a woman from the US who writes to a bookshop in the UK that kind of specializes in old and antique books, and she's looking for specific editions of some of her favorite books, and she can't find them in nice editions in the US, so she decides that she will special order them from the UK. And it ends up being like a 20-30 year time span that this book covers of letters exchanged between her and the bookshop, and she starts to get to know the employees and sends them care packages, and they go out of their way to estate sales and whatnot to track down these rare book requests that she has. And I can see why it's so well loved on Booktube, because it is one of those kind of magical literary experiences of tracking down your favorite books in beautiful editions, and there's so much talk in the letters about different nitpicky things that only book lovers would care about bindings and first editions and end papers and things like that. Obviously, having a multicast of narrators for a nonfiction book is somewhat unique. I think most of the nonfiction that I have listened to has always been single narrator, but because this was epistolary nonfiction, it worked extremely effectively to have all these different narrators bring the different individuals and their letters to life. So those are my 5 favorite multicast audiobooks. If you have listened to any fantastic multicast audiobooks, I would love to know which books you would recommend in this format, because it's definitely a subgenre of audiobooks that I absolutely love listening to, and I think it makes such a unique listening experience to have not just the book read to you, but the book read to you in a variety of voices and intonations, that although there are definitely single cast narrators who can do a fantastic job bringing different characters to life, and I do appreciate the skills that they have in that area, having the multicast is just a really unique way of listening to a book be brought to life. So until next time, enjoy wandering through the pages of a good book.